Rance, you're going to find out I'm a hoarder. The amount of stuff I have, rock crawling stuff sitting around still. I saved way too many things. I'm glad I did now, though. I got to be honest with you.
Well, me too. I don't have very much.
Oh, I have duplicates of stuff. So if there's anything you want when I have it.
You'll do it?
Oh, yeah. Wow. How did you find that?
I saved and I made files and folders of stuff, but I have the itineraries. I have my rejection letter, the one when you told me I couldn't come. I'll read that one tonight when we're on there.
Well, yeah, let's see how kind my wording was.
You didn't write it, so Erica Pratt wrote it. Here's the rule book.
Yeah, I pulled up the rule book versions just recently, and a lot of the things would, kind of still stand.
Yep. Scorecards, registrations. This.
Oh, see, I think, so that was probably before the merge.
Yeah.
You can tell, I can tell by the kind of the script.
Yeah, the writing on it.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact timeline on that, but very cool. And then when you ruined rock crawling
videos, I've been trying to find. There's a video somewhere from CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. Do you remember?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've been trying to find that, but no luck so far. It seems like he thought there were other important world events going on too.
And then when you
looked that up, and I apologize for that. Maybe I could do that while we're streaming, and I could screen share that because that'll be fun.
If you can find it, yeah, I couldn't find it. I've got it on a video, literally on a CD somewhere, and then there was like Inside Edition, and there was some cool stuff for the time.
So I have some of the stuff from when Craig had it and everything too.
Well, guys, are you ready to start? We have some people on.
Yeah. Close his window.
Of course, he goes away at that point.
Oh, come on. I'm all good.
All right. Well, welcome, everybody. My name is Tiffany Andrews. I do the podcast here for UROCK. And tonight I have my co-host, Charlie Melchner. I figured bring in the old time pro rock crawler to interview our guest, Ranch Pratt, who basically started it all with a competition rock crawling. And Ranch, one thing I do with all my guests is when we start off, I would love to hear how this all came about.
How did it get started?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I think it got started because people started rock crawling, just period. And they go out there, and then like if Charlie and I are buddies on the trail and we get to an obstacle and it's whatever, it's got some name, and if I make it and he doesn't, I'm feeling pretty good. And I think the truth of the matter is people go out there and they're watching their buddy and they're thinking, God, I hope he kind of struggles, because that spirit of competition is there. Anytime there's particularly a motorsport, there's competition. And so I think that spirit of competition grew from just recreational trail riding than quote unquote rock crawling, when there was more rocks, because they tend to create the obstacles. So that's really it. I was into it because I was into rock crawling myself. I got coerced actually into going off-roading down in Moab, and I didn't want to go. And then I was guilted into it literally. And so I begrudgingly went, and we went on a trail, and we were following It was like this baby blue CJ7, probably with a locker. And the trail by today's standards would be zero. But I was still blown away. I couldn't believe what that thing could do. We were struggling like crazy. We were in an open diff Toyota, but that thing was not. And it was really amazing to me. So I came home and I'm like, I'm buying a Jeep. And I was pretty young. I didn't have any money, but when you find a way, bought a Jeep. I quit my job at Easton Sports and I went and worked at a 4-wheel drive shop, Mepco. And that was kind of the start of, that was the introduction of me in the industry, really. And and then some years went by and we started Terraflex. And then we're thinking about marketing and different things. And I know that competition, that competitive spirit's there because I have it. And so when the opportunity came up and things kind of aligned, we decided, let's go ahead and let's do a rock crawling competition. And, we can use that for marketing purposes here. We can get other companies involved. And then the other big piece that I was thinking at the time was it'll give us a chance to see, like, people are pretty ingenious, and the stuff that they come up with for their rigs is also pretty ingenious, and we can see that stuff, and maybe we can get some glimpse of what's to come, and that would help our company. So that was the original intent. And then, it kind of morphed along the way.
So let's talk about the morph, because, for anybody that's tuning in right now, you started, it was originally ARCA, American Rock Crawler Association. You came up with this idea for the competition, and let's kind of like talk about that and how it came about and the evolving of
it was
how,
all that. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, well, that's what it was. We called it an association because our original plan, and always the plan, was that we had competitions, and that's awesome. And we also had an organization that helps with education for people that are new into the sport. We wanted to be on both sides of that extreme, right? The brand new guy and the guy that you're like, what are you doing? And I kind of still think that's what the sport really needs. It needs that holistic outlook from somebody. But that's what we wanted to do. We did our first event in Farmington, New Mexico. And we had all what were the big guys and still are kind of legends, and they came from all over. And it was so interesting how we did it then compared to what it is now. Then we went into the glade, and for those people who have been there, you come off the highway into a giant wash, and then you go up a ways to wherever you're going to go 4-wheel, and there's a ton of trails up there, and it's really amazing. And our space wasn't like it is now. Now it's tiny. You go into your area and you can see all these obstacles going on at the same time. But then it was like, here is an obstacle, and then 300 yards or 200 yards or whatever is another obstacle, and then you go around a corner and up there. And there were, I think, 7 obstacles in each group, and there were 2 sections, so there's 14 obstacles, and they were miles apart. It was massive. So that was kind of the start. I had worked with Goodyear along with other people, and Goodyear was the marquee sponsor. It was the Goodyear Extreme Rock Crawling Nationals. So, but then as we were kind of getting closer to it, I got wind that a guy, I think his name is Dave Wilkins, and he was coming down from Goodyear to Farmington, and he was going to watch the event. But his main goal there was to let us know. Well, along the way, we decided we're going to do a whole series instead of just one event. So we told them that. We told Goodyear that, and we had plans for the following year. So his job was to come down and say, watch the event, report back where their money had been spent, how it went, but also to tell me that they're not doing the series. They're not going to sponsor an entire series. They just wanted this one-off event, and that was it. And we got wind of that a little bit early. So we took all the money that we had, all the profit that we would have made off of that first event from entry fees and, sponsorship dollars, and we dumped it all back into advertising. We put our own money in. We were like broke by the start of the event. We had no money, but we had a bunch of ads running, which was also hard because there was no footage. There was nothing. We couldn't put it on TV. We could only do radio. And so we kind of kludged together what seemed like was an event in the background with noise and, the guy with the right motorsport voice. And then we decided not to charge at the gate. It's free for everybody. And he came out there. He gave away a ton of tires. We went out into the glade, and there were people everywhere. That massive place, it was huge. It was just coated with people. And after the event, he said, well, I called into the office and said, we have to be a part of this. And so then they signed up at that event for the rest of the season, for the full series, which was really cool.
That's pretty awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was kind of the start of it all. And it was super stressful, and there's people coming out, Ned Bacon, I've read his articles, and he would, Ned.
Yep.
Yeah. So he'd write, and there he is. I've never met him, but he's competing in my thing, and all these Shannon Campbell, and he had Pinky, and I'd seen Pinky in the magazines too. If you recall, that was that kind of flat fender buggy sort of thing.
Yep.
And I'm just some guy from, I have Terraflex, but big whoop. These guys know how to wheel, and it was a big deal to me. And it was really stressful. We had a full tech inspection, and we didn't even, we set up some very, very basic rules. And now looking back, I'm like, man, those rules were so basic, and they were sufficient, I suppose, for, what was going on with those vehicles, but they did not contemplate what was to come at all, which created a lot of challenges. So
that's for certain.
So, and then there was drama at the first event. In those days, you'd hear about people rolling occasionally, but nobody videoed it. Everyone didn't walk around with a camera, and let's see, Jeff Wagner. Everyone knew him as Rookie. He was competing with John Curry in the Rocky Road. I think it is their Jeep. It was a TJ, and all these other guys are there, and we had radios, but the place was so big we really had to leapfrog communication. And Rookie went on an obstacle that was insane for the time. It was really tall for the time, and he rolled into brush, which I don't know, made it somehow worse. And there were so many people that everybody gasped, and you could hear the crowd. And then this word started passing around, rookie rolled, and I was kind of freaking out because people didn't roll. And, I run over there, and he's okay. And he's still kind of disoriented in his Jeep in this bush. But it was funny because the competitors were like a little bit shaken and a little bit upset. But it didn't take them long it sort of changed everything. That was the moment that it was like, no, this is real. This is extreme stuff. And then the builds began, the changes to vehicles began, and it was quite the ride from that moment on. But I think that was a pivotal moment, was Rookie rolling, one of those pivotal moments.
It was pivotal for my notes because I have that circled. Rookie rolled.
Well, that was the thing, and I heard it on the radio. Rookie rolled, and he and John. They were really well known. Chris Durham was not known at all. Nobody had heard of Chris, and everybody has heard of him now, and there's like the Chris Durham style of driving, and then there's the really methodical tiptoe type of driving, and they're totally the opposite. And those two are actually kind of totally the opposite. And as it turned out throughout that year, it was Durham and rookie, Curry, that were sort of head to head, and it was quite a season.
I remember seeing all that stuff. I would, magazines and all those things, because that was the year before I got my feet in there, and that was to have been 99 or 2000. That was, right?
It was 99.
Yeah, because I was at Top Truck Challenge in 99, and I met Ben Stewart, Ned Bacon, I met Sonny Honager, and the whole big chatter was, there's this thing where we're driving through Cones rock crawling, and they had, at Top Truck Challenge, they had built that rock course, that big boulder course. And then, as luck would have it, I won that one thing. So it was like, I didn't need anything else to egg me on to be a rock crawler.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I won that section of it. So that really made it bad, But they were all talking about rock crawling. And I had seen the coverage that was coming out here and there. I was one of those, you run to the store for the magazines to come out, even though you had a subscription. If it wasn't there, if someone else you talked to had it, you had to run to the mall to go ahead to or the newsstand to try to find it so we could see what was going on.
Yeah, I kind of missed that type of a feel, the magazines. It's too bad they're gone, because we sure lost the authority in an industry.
Yeah, it was real. It was really, really amazing. And I was just out, I was saying I'm just some Yahoo riding through the woods. And at that point, we entered Top Truck Challenge as a joke, and not as a joke, as just have fun. I didn't think we were going to actually go across the country and do all that, and we did when we got picked. But when I got out there, I met Grady McLeod, who won, and he was big into rock crawling out there. And I had met all of the Western celebrities that I knew. I had met a whole bunch of them. And then that was it. I was like, I left there and went to the Chili Challenge and spent time with Walker and Harold and Chip, and that they were just like, you got to come back out here, talking to me like I was like, yeah, I'll just throw stuff into my 18-wheeler and, I'll load up, come out for a couple of weeks, no big deal, We're driving a pickup truck with a flat deck trailer and, running out of money every single time we turn around, but it had a hold of me. It was awesome just watching it. What?
Charlie, didn't you buy a pickup truck to go out there?
So I had a gas-powered 1-ton Chevy, and when I left Top Truck Challenge, Ben Stewart said to me, there's a new Isuzu Duramax going into an Isuzu engine going into the Chevy pickup trucks. And at the time, Chevy only had that dead 6.5 turbo. And he said, just go to the dealership and buy one. And I talked to Ben all the time. And he was just go buy one. And then Ned said the same thing. And they're like, you have to get it. We drove it. It's incredible. You can't believe that it's a diesel and this, that, and the other. And sure enough, I got home. I went to the dealership, and I think it was LB7 was the code for the first one. And they said, I went in, and they didn't even know what it was. And my local dealership, I knew them my whole life. I went in and I said, I want to order a 3/4 ton. And at the time, you could get a crew cab short bed, which was unheard of. And I want the LB7 option. And I ordered it. Nobody knew what it was. And mine came in, and I put 950 miles on it before we hooked up to drive cross country to go to the ARCA event in February. We had just gotten it. We got a gooseneck hitch in it. Just got last minute, spent every penny I had to do that. It was the kind of thing. It was back in the day when I used to go to the dealership once a week, and I would drop off cash for them as my deposit grew. So I kept bringing them more money every week. Here's another 200. Here's another 500. And they would, the Fisher brothers, they were my friends forever. So they would just keep taking my money. All right, Charlie, you're up to 3,000 and 5,000. And, so also I could go do this silly stuff.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, Ranch, we're going to talk more about you and all your endeavors and things you do. But I personally want to thank you for what you've done. There's been some incredible people in rock crawling and have really, really changed many people's worlds and in a good way. You gave us something to be passionate about, something to enjoy, something to do that we can't live without now. And that was really an amazing thing. And you're one of those people, and thank you for doing that. Even though I'm going to share with everybody in a minute this letter that you wrote me, or actually you didn't, but this letter, I almost wasn't a rock crawler, just so everybody knows. I went and I tried to get into my first rock crawling event, and I was declined. And I just want to tell you real quick, I won't read the whole letter, but Wrench, you guys sent me a letter, and you were smart enough to send me an application for the next event to see if I could get into that. But you guys said, thanks for your application for the Johnson Valley Goodyear National Rock Crawling Championship. I regret to inform you that you were unable to accept your application into this event due to the number of applicants at this date. That's how many people you had. And I will tell you, I'm sure the day you sent this application, I could get it or called the number on here, because it was in Riverton, Utah. I probably asked for this immediately and got it in as quick as I could. And I was turned down. And this is like, I didn't go to college or try to go to college. I never wanted to. But this to me would have been the equivalent of if I applied to the college I want and I opened the letter and it said, you can't go. I was like, wait a minute, what? This is what I'm supposed to do. I knew this is what I was going to do. I knew this is what I was going to waste all my money on and obsess over and build over and go crazy over forever. But you guys turned me down. And you enclosed the application for the next event. And you thanked me for my interest, and they were really sorry that you couldn't do it. But the nice thing was on the bottom, there's a handwritten part of it that I know wasn't you. And on the bottom, it said, you were number 72 on the list. So you're second on the waiting list. And I was like crushed. I was all about going to Johnson Valley to compete in the biggest rock crawling thing that anybody had ever seen. I was going to be a part of that. I couldn't believe it. And I didn't even give up. I kept working on my rock crawler. And, I had come home from Top Truck and I had built what I believe still to this day, I built the first full tube buggy on the East Coast because I saw Sonny's Scorpion. And I built my crusher, which that was my crusher at the ARCA event, the big, huge, my red 4-seater. Yeah. But you guys did eventually, you sent me a congratulations letter that I was accepted. So I did get in. So this was like, yeah. And I was very excited. And you told me all about where to go and what to do. And then when I started looking at my notes on some of these other things, some of my notes say things like how many miles per gallon the truck got and how big the fuel tank was on the truck we were towing with. And it was things like a 20-gallon fuel tank and 4 miles to the gallon. Oh. We were trying to figure out we were going to get across the country.
Every stop. Yeah, well, back in those days, 60, I guess, competitors would probably fill it because I think we always timed the obstacles, and I think the time in the beginning was like 15 minutes, right? So then you do the math, and there's all those obstacles, and there was 14 obstacles. It took a long time. Those were some long days. In fact, one time we almost didn't get through the event. It was pretty stressful. And then we shortened it down. And actually looking back, it's like, Kyle, maybe we should have broken into 3 groups and had longer times, because I think one of the challenges with rock crawling today is the amount of seat time that people get competing. You go out there, you spend all that money, you prep your car, your buggy or whatever, and you do all that work, and then you get 10 obstacles or whatever that the promoter has, but the times are so short that your total driving time isn't all that long, and it would be nice to have a little longer driving time, but it's a real balance between keeping people's interest, the public's interest, spectators, and giving the drivers enough time to, 1, make it worthwhile, and 2, catch up, right? The longer the event, the more time there is for people to make mistakes, the more time there is for people to catch up and to do a better job. And so that's a real delicate balance, even today.
Yeah.
And so that was why, now, like the super crawl, after we changed and it became UROCK and we had the first combined supercrawl, we had 140 or something like that entrants, and we got through those. I wouldn't say unscathed, but we got through them. So
Was that '02? You think? Was that 2002?
probably sometime around there.
Okay, so you had in Unlimited, you had 62 competitors in Unlimited, because I have the final finishing order, and I have all the competitors' names and their scores.
How do you have all that stuff?
So the 2002 Supercrawl Championship, the Unlimited class, you had 62. I do have the other classes as well, but I just kept this one out in front of me. And I do, just for the record, my name is on here on the first sheet. It is on here with Kyle's, and it was 27th. I was pretty happy about that. Pretty happy. But anyway, go ahead. If you want any more information about what you've done, I probably have it in this pile on my table right here.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was just saying, I have a hat. I've got a flag. I got a couple of flags.
Yep.
I think Matt Westridge has most of the stuff in a trailer. So if anybody wants old UROCK or ARCA swag, you can start beating him up.
So you're putting that out there, and you're seeing Charlie's collection here. Poor Matt is gonna get bombarded.
I know.
I'm
doing this as because he always gives me crap. I've got to do something to get back. So it's like writing his name for a good time on the bathroom stall or something. But yeah, it were crazy days, and there was a lot of there were a lot of growing pains. It was really interesting. Like the first event that I was talking about in Farmington, we had all those guys with their maybe TJs, a few TJs and some CJs and YJs and some Grand Cherokees even. In fact, I remember there was a guy with a Grand Cherokee with like probably 32s or something, and it was pretty nice. And he pulled up to the first obstacle, and he kind of got on it a little bit, but then he backed off and he said, "I'm done." I did not know what I was getting myself into. And then the vehicles began to change, and then along came a pretty good purse. I think some people will know, but I think it was within a couple of years we put out a $20,000 purse per event, and then a $20,000 series win, purse. And when we did that, it became very serious, and a lot of the fun of it kind of diminished, because now people are serious, and then the vehicles just began to change so fast. In fact, on the first year, it actually began to change. I think it was the second event. It was in Apache Junction or Phoenix area, and Walker Evans shows up, and Walker Evans is the winningest desert racer, I think, of all time, still to this day. And he shows up, and he's sponsored by Chevrolet, and he's sponsored by Goodyear, and Goodyear sponsored us, and people were mad, and nobody liked him. And that's really weird, because he's almost impossible to not like. He's such a good guy, but because he's a desert racer and you're coming into our area and we're trying to develop a sport, that the other teams were like, chip on their shoulder. And fortunately for all of us, he didn't build the rig quite right the first time. It was like an S10 Blazer, and it just didn't perform like he wanted. So then he goes back and he comes to Vernal, and he has a S10 a pickup, but it was I think really the start of the first buggies. It wasn't a moon buggy, but it was a tube chassis, S10 looking thing, and it was killing it. It was light, and he was killing it at Vernal, and he actually won. But there was a lot of friction. He won. There was the judges. The judge made a controversial call, and I'm doing scoring, and here comes like the lynch mob coming towards me because there was a controversy. And for what it's worth, I mean, rock crawling really changed my life and my ability, how I actually deal with problems, because there were plenty of them. And so, yeah, that event was a big one.
I wanted to talk to you about that. Like, I have that aside because Charlie said about being like the first two buggy on the East Coast, but I remember you telling me about it. And that, as a series promoter, as a marshal, what have you, that was like your first big controversial thing that you needed when Walker showed up. There was some issues.
Yeah.
And that was like the first big call you needed to make.
The buggy, he's pretty good at reading those rules. You know, there's people that are really good at reading rules and then fudging them a little bit. Like, there's a guy in NASCAR that kind of moved the whole chassis over to the driver's side because it didn't tell you. It told you had to have a chassis and it had to be this wide, but it didn't say really where it had to be. So it gave him some advantage. He didn't do any of that stuff, and I'm sure it's because he was coming in there with what at the time was such a wild vehicle. But then, that event had a lot of sure. Yeah. That event had a lot of controversy. He, as it turns out, so here's the new guy. He's got a new vehicle. Everybody's looking at it. Joel Randall, a lot of people know him. He's an outstanding driver, and he's he's just a great guy all the way around. Everybody loved Joel. Walker's there with his new buggy, and they are neck and neck, and it comes down to the last obstacle. And as fate would have it, it actually comes down to Walker is the last one on the last obstacle. That means every competitor and all of their team were watching that obstacle. And if he does really well on this obstacle, he will win. And if he doesn't, he'll come in second. Mm-hmm. And he comes up this climb, and he hits a cone, but the judge didn't. I don't recall if the judge flat out didn't see it, or I kind of think the judge thought he hit a brush and the brush hit the cone. But that's somewhat irrelevant. The judge didn't call it. And then the people erupt, and somebody comes over there and they've got a camera because they were that big. And he's got like a VHS or something. And he's showing the judge where Walker had hit this cone. And so the judge said, "Oh, you're right." And he overturns it. Now Walker's in second. And so here comes the lynch mob that I was talking about, right? I'm just doing my thing and I look up and it's like, oh crap, here they come. And then there's all the people on one camp saying, this is, what happened, and it's got to stick. He hit the cone. You hit a cone, you hit a cone. That's what the sport's about. And the next side saying he didn't call it, and then he overturned it. And it was challenging. Walker was sponsored by Goodyear. We were sponsored by Goodyear. That really actually didn't enter my mind a bunch, but it certainly lingers there. You can't be human and have it not. And the fact that it's for first and second, and the fact that it's Walker Evans. There was a lot of pressure. And my partner in Terraflex was also a partner in ARCA. That was what this was at the time. And we're leaning over a truck trying to make the decision. And then it occurred to us, look, we're just gonna strip out all the external stuff, the fact that it's Walker, the fact that it's Goodyear, the fact that it's for the lead, and we're just going to talk about the incident. And we made the determination that we don't have instant replay. We don't have cameras on every obstacle. They weren't even on that obstacle every time. They just happened to be on that time because everybody was there. They're cameras, instant replay, inadmissible. So we overturned the judge's overturning, and we put it back to the way the judge originally made the call, and then we just suffered through it. And I remember at the award ceremony when I was announcing who won, and I've never really had cotton mouth, where you're so anxious about something that it's actually hard to spit out the words. But it was pretty tough. And I had heard, we're going to block him from getting the trophy. Nobody did that. They were all awesome, but there was that looming threat, and it was pretty tough. And I know that's the challenge with rock crawling is there's always judgment calls, and some people make them. There might be a wrong call, and you just have to live with it. So there was a lot of those, and you learned a lot about, making decisions. And I think for the teams, they learned a lot about sportsmanship because you had no choice. Things didn't go your way and you might be pissed, but but at the end of it all, you reason it out, and that's so it was really good for the sport, I think, to have those kind of things. And I think it's a lot better today. The other challenge was all the vehicles kept changing so fast. We just hardly could keep up.
Yeah, it was.
I want to say that I'm doing research right now as we're talking, and PowerNationTV.com, if people want to go back in the day and watch some good UROCK videos, it is there. I'm trying to find the CBS News so we can kind of stream it and share it with
yeah,
people.
I'd love to see that again. It was CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. I can't remember the year even, but the sport was on there. We were on there, UROCK. I think the Wall Street Journal Inside Edition. Nobody probably remembers even what that show was, but yeah, it was all of those.
It was happening. It's so fast. Shannon was building a new car. Every event, he'd have a new car.
Yeah.
Everybody was changing, whether it was your wheel rim width, how much, what you did with this, where your motor sat, your suspension, even though it wasn't adjustable, where your links would go. Everybody was cutting the suspension off and moving it. And leaf springs, were there and then gone in the blink of an eye. It was a joke. Bill Steen got involved and built special shocks for us for rock crawling, and Walker built his own shocks, and it really did explode, changed. I talked to Big Rich about this a bunch when I did one of his podcast, and truthfully, that stuff that we were doing, like you said in the beginning, you were watching. There are some incredibly smart people that know how to build stuff, and their ideas and what they were doing changed the industry forever. Someone had asked me once, without rock crawling, do you think that everything would have changed as much as it did? And I said, yeah, the people were doing it. The cones may have accelerated it more, but the drive to beat your buddy and be the best has been there with these guys, and they're so good. What it did do was it pushed the tire companies into a war to be the number one off-road rock crawling tire. That was the big thing that I saw, and the other companies that got involved saw you couldn't help it. I mean, the excitement that was going on was just crazy.
Yeah, there was so much change. The buggies came out, the engines moved to the middle, or the mid-engine or rear, and that created a lot of challenges. You had to, like I said in the beginning, the rules were like woefully inadequate for these kind of things. So we had to change the rules. At least we tried to just change them at year end, right, between seasons. But then there'd be these safety issues that would come up because of some change to a vehicle, and we'd make the change because we were nervous about somebody getting hurt, and that created a lot of controversy. We added, for example, firewalls, and floorboards. And for some people, it was like we were trying to kill their kids, with how mad they were. We're just watching out for you. There's no competitive advantage, maybe looking and seeing your tire, but it was really tough to keep up with those changes, and then here comes rear steer, and it's like, crap. Like, we want to allow that. And Jeep was pushing us to keep it Jeep. They weren't saying keep it Jeep. They were saying keep the vehicles stock looking. And I remember having a conversation with him and saying, how do we even do that? Like, these guys, if we keep them stock and we limit the capabilities of those vehicles, it limits the progression of the sport with respect to the obstacles they can do. And then they're going to go somewhere else. So for our own viability, we have to allow the buggies to develop. We have to allow things to grow. The obstacles were getting more crazy as the years went by. The vehicles were getting more crazy. So then we had classes, which are still used today. But I think the tire wars were a real thing. Sorry, it was a big thing too, because that pushed the entire sport. The focus went from desert racing to rock crawling. and we were lucky. We had Goodyear was our original sponsor, but BF Goodrich was they would show up. I remember them in Farmington, and Goodyear was the marquee. It was the Goodyear again, the Goodyear, and I think by then Skyjacker got involved as also co-marquee. So it was the Goodyear Skyjacker Extreme Rock Crawling Nationals. But here's this event, and then way over there, outside of this smaller area, was the BF Goodrich Semi. And I walked over there, and there's Frank D'Angelo and Dennis Weaver, I think, were at the time, and they're in there, and they wanted to talk, and they were as respectful and awesome as individuals could ever be. I mean, I don't think there's a more classy guy than Frank. But
no doubt.
We're here in the background. We want to support our teams. We don't want to horn in on your event. We'd love to be a part of the event, but we respect that, it's Goodyear's event. But we know that this is kind of the way of the future. And so they were great. And then eventually, we merged and we allowed them in, and Goodyear and Maxxis and Toyo and Nitto. It was really unique. You don't see that. You didn't see it before. You still don't see where there's a bunch of tire manufacturers. And that war was on. The tire wars, the stickies were everywhere. You could get tire. I had a garage full of tires, and I think those days are kind of gone. But that is one thing that I think is kind of missing from today's world. The manufacturers need to get more involved.
Yeah. I don't understand. The only thing I could think of a lot of times right now is they're getting it for free. So why bother doing anything else is what I think sometimes they're wondering, because most of us have decided at this point that our drive, if we've been in it this long, you're getting into it and you're going to make the commitment. Your drive to win is so strong that you're going to get the product that you feel is the best product you could possibly have. You know what I mean? That's really, to the fact that even if it's, if you could afford it new from a second best company, you'll buy used from the best, for a best company's part used, rather than get a new half as good product. And I think a lot of the manufacturers, they just feel that way. They've cornered the market. I mean, BFG doesn't do much with anybody right now, but they've got the crawler and it's hard to beat. I ran Super Swampers and I had to cave eventually because if I knew if we were going to really try to be on the podium, my son's car and my car, you need every little bit of an advantage, especially with a guy like me that makes so many mistakes. I need to be well ahead of the curve with my equipment. Otherwise I'll never get there. So we switched to BFG.
Well, and that's a tragic thing. The manufacturers, and if there's any listening, I hope they listen, because there's a couple of, as a manufacturer, you can test your product, right, on the QT, right? I can put and really, if a manufacturer wants to be the best, they have to be the best.
Yeah.
Obviously. And so they need to test, they need to try new things. They need research and development. They need engineers out there. You're putting a tire through the most insane thing that could ever see. And it gets worse and worse. I mean, the obstacles from back then are nothing like they are today. Those guys should all still be out there. The tire wars should still be going on. Those guys should be developing better and better and better tires, using rock crawling, as one of the avenues to do it. And why wouldn't they? I mean, look at the number of Jeeps on the road today. At least out here in the West, I can't drive a mile without several Jeeps around me. They're everywhere. So why wouldn't they be pushing that market a lot more? And the only way to become the best is to test. So that you can do that. And then the other thing you can do is you can go out there so one is to test, the other one is to prove, and then market, right? So they should be testing their stuff. And when they get it right on the quiet, then they get it into the hands of the top competitors and they start to win and start pushing that. I think there's some big changes coming in the tire world, and I could be wrong, but I think the top dogs should be working.
It's funny, when I first I was running 44-inch boggers and boggers on the rear and TSLs in the front. Real, V8 East Coast kind of guy, right?
Yeah.
So I had my 2-buggy, and Jim O'Dice, that owns OK 4-Wheel Drive in New Jersey, was a huge supporter of off-roading in Pennsylvania, and still is. He has an amazing company and a great business. But he was super supportive of our local series that came into play based off of everything, which was UROCK. And Kyle Noss was running that, and Jim came on board. And about part of the way through the first, I think it was the first season, Jim called me and said, Charlie, BF Goodrich is working on a tire right now. And the tire is going to be strictly for competition, special rubber, special tread pattern. And he said, you should really try to get a part of it. He said, and if you'd like, I can call them and put a good word in for you. I sell a lot of BF Goodrich tires. So I said, how big is it going to be? And he said, 37 inches. I said, oh, geez, I run 44s. What am I going to do with a 37-inch tire? I said, but see what they say and we'll see what happens. So he called me back a couple of days later and he said, yeah, they're not really looking for anybody else right now. They have enough people. They're not going to do anything. I said, well, I appreciate you asking. I went out to a UROCK event and it was at the Badlands. And I finished like the third or fourth course and I was in the lead, and a fella came over to me with a black mustache and thick black hair. And he said, Charlie, my name's Frank D'Angelo and I think you should run BF Goodrich tires. And I said, oh, Frank, I was thinking about it. I said, but they turned me down. They told me they don't need anybody else for the tires. And he said, Charlie, he said, I'm Frank D'Angelo. He said, and I work with Jackson Dawson Motorsports. And he said, I think you should run BF Goodrich tires. And I said, oh, well, I said, if you have a connection, I said, and you could help me out with it, I said, I'll see how they work. And if they're good, then I'd probably run them in a comp. And he goes, yeah, I've got a connection. I can get you tires. So he said, would you try them? Right. Yeah. What do I know? Right. That this is who's Frank D'Angelo. I had no idea. Right.
Yeah.
So I leave that event. I'm on the way home. He calls me and says, I'm going to ship you 5 tires. They're coming from here, blah, blah, blah. You'll need a 17-inch wheel. So then I was like, 17-inch wheel? What do we have, race cars here? Is it if you were, you ran a 15-inch wheel with a bead lock, and if you ran like I did, 44s, you could only get 16 5s or 16s. And if you wanted bead locks, you had to run a Hummer wheel. And I was getting Hummer wheels through Chris Durham, who he was getting them from Pat Gramillion from out west from you guys. He was bringing them all home by the trailer load, and we were selling them all over PA and, up and down the East Coast. So there I am now. I said, 17-inch wheels. So, okay. So I call a couple of people and everybody laughs and says, no, you can't we don't have 17-inch wheels. It's 6 months to build a 17-inch wheel. Can't happen, can't do it. So I called Frank back the next day and I said, I can't get wheels. I said, I appreciate it. And he says, get a pen. I said, okay. So I write down a thing. He says, call this guy. His name's Greg Mulkey. Works for a company that's making nice aluminum wheels. He'll say up. I said, oh, I called them already. They said, no, they don't have any wheels. Like, they don't have wheels for me. He said, no, he said, just call this guy, Greg, and tell him that I told you that, that you need wheels. So I called this guy, Greg, on the phone, and he, talked to him. I called his cell phone. I didn't know. I had no idea that I was calling Greg Mulkey. And he says, yeah, we could have. I said, well, Frank D'Angelo really wants me to have them. There's an event next weekend. And he said, how many do you need and where do you need them shipped to? I went, I better write that name down, Frank D'Angelo. That gets stuff done, Yeah, right. And the next thing I know, I had wheels shipped out, and I showed up at that next competition in Pennsylvania, and everybody laughed at me. And I remember the biggest statement somebody said to me was, what are you going to do with those little pizza cutter tires on there? And I didn't know what I was going to do because I really didn't get to test them much of anything. I went on to win the event, and afterwards someone, we were joking around, and I said, well, I guess I'm going to win with these tires, It's like the biggest joke. But nobody, unless you had like a TJ or a CJ, you ran maybe a 33 or a 35-inch all-terrain, and you were worried about the sidewalls back then. Everybody was concerned about that. But within a year after those tires being on my rig and then Ken Shoup and, a few other guys on the East Coast, you couldn't turn around and not see either a 35-inch crawler or a 37-inch crawler on a rig. And the only other tire that was there besides that was Goodyear, the MTR, because it was the best tire over, Beatrice wasn't even running in a close second place at the time.
Yep.
But that marketing idea, when they got it to a few of us out there, and we started riding around on them, luckily winning a few events, doing good, having big mouths talking about it, it just changed everything. And we watched that happen. And that was, again, because of competition, it was cool.
Yeah. And that can still occur. The competition is what is the halo product. If you're a manufacturer, competition is your halo product,
Mm-hmm.
your halo marketing thing. So I really wish, there's always shifts, and for us, even it was challenging. We had Goodyear for years. We had BF Goodrich for years, and I'm not going to pick on any one of them because every single company out there, Maxxis, Toyo, all of them had this kind of thing go on where they'd have a shift in marketing people. And so we'd get news that, hey, a company, blah, 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 so-and-so's gone. And now it's this new guy named whatever. And I'd just be like, oh gosh, here we go. Because you're going in brand new, right? And the challenge is they don't want to do what the other guy did. They want to make a mark for themselves in their company. And so you had to start over and kind of pitch the entire rock crawling thing all new, and somehow overcome this objection that they're going to naturally have of doing what the other guy did, because then he's only building on the X guy's legacy. And it was tough, but if people were really not looking out just for, this sounds pretty rough, but if they're not just looking out for their career, but they're looking out for the company that they work for, they would embrace motorsports, rock racing, rock crawling, all of them, desert racing. That, like I said, that is the halo product. And if you want a better product, go prove it.
Right.
And then advertise the hell out of it, because people will jump on that stuff. So
I always thought it was so cool when we would go to an event with you, and then you would walk out and we would all question you about, we really put you through your paces with, well, what about if we go over there? And what if we do this? And what if that happens? And then, well, can we or can't we do that? We were always really, really poking and prodding at you and asking questions and putting you on the spot. And then, a lot of times everybody would go, oh, you can do that. And you'd go, well, you can't do that, but you could do this, And it was always fun to watch you figure out, what was going to be allowed and what wasn't. And the rules, again, this rule book is about 8 pages that I have from 2001. It's paperback, 8 pages long. It's like nothing, And the questions that would come out of it, and then we would get all over you. Every event, there'd be one obstacle that we'd all lose our mind over. What do you want us to wreck our car? This is ridiculous. We don't make enough money. We drove across the country. Some people lived right there, but we had all these excuses. And you would look at us and go, listen, I'm not taking this out of the obstacle. I'm not taking this obstacle out. I'm not going to go ahead and move the cone, because one of you is going to do it. And because one of you is going to do it, most of you are going to do it. He said, and then someone's going to do it perfect, and they're not going to take a cone, and they're not going to do anything wrong. He said, you're going to do it. And every single time, I remember the first time we saw the money pit, we were like, no possible way. That's insane. How could that, you can't get that out of there. That's ridiculous. What do you want, all junk cars? We won't be able to come back in 2 weeks and compete if we try to do that. We're all going to flip over. I didn't climb it, but a whole bunch of people climbed it. It was amazing. I always laughed. The fact that you could see and work with, and who was doing the obstacles with you and setting the gates and stuff?
Phil Collard.
Yeah, Phil. Yeah. That's right. And the fact that you guys could pick out those, that's what Hans does now with X-Rock. We look at his stuff and we really give him hell, because we're like, come on. But again, 9 times out of 10, somebody gets it, and then someone else gets it, and so on and so on. But back then, man, we really, we were all over you, like about every little thing. And I'll tell this one quick story about my first event when I came out to Johnson Valley and I met you. We had Chris Graham was out there with me, Jack Bettio was with me, and Chris's cousin, we call him Cousin Dave. And when we were out there at that event, I went to go through the last gate before the finish gate on an obstacle, and I had the crusher. It was huge and wide and big. And the last set of cones was so narrow that if it was in a parking lot on flat ground and I had 10 people on each side telling me to go, I couldn't fit between it. My buggy was wider. And the rule book did say a minimum width of your gates. Cousin Dave was the kind of guy, and still is, that will, when he pulls up and he comes to you, he's got a Leatherman, he's got a Gerber, he's got a pocket knife, he's got a pen, a pencil, a marker, a flashlight. He probably has a stapler, some safety tape, some stitching material, a couple of aspirin. He's got everything with him you can imagine. So he did have a tape measure, and he measured that. So this, now of course, now I'm like, I can't believe it. So I go to Ranch, the big dog. I muster up the guts to say, hey, this is wrong. This gate is too small. And Ranch looks right at me and says, yeah, that sucks. But other people have ran it, so there's nothing we can do right now. Sorry. And I just shut me right there. I drove all the way across. It took me like 9 days for us to get to California, getting 4 miles to the gallon. I got maps and charts and where we're going for. You know, it was ridiculous, this whole big trip. And I went on to keep wheeling and trying and pushing. But I'll never forget that. I was like, well, that's how this is. That's it. You said, no, there's nothing we can do about it. Other people have done it already.
Yeah, I think that anybody who does the sport now, especially when it comes to like rock crawling, where there's these obstacles, they can't change. I mean, they might change naturally, or somebody moves a big rock or something, but it is what it is. And we ran into this many times where something wasn't awesome, and you can't fix it. Like we had that event that I kind of mentioned earlier, where we didn't even know if we had finished the event. I was stressing out because we might not finish by Sunday night, and people have to drive across the country. What are we going to do? But people are saying, well, you need to eliminate a gate. And it's like, well, which one? The one you did terrible on? Should we eliminate that one? Or should we eliminate the one that guy did fantastic on, and now he drops down? You just cannot change anything.
Right.
And consistency is what you're really targeting, and it's challenging. It's a judgment call. Things happen, I remember when you showed up at that event. Didn't you have a red? Wasn't it red?
Yeah.
Your butt. Okay. Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah. And back then, you had 40, whatever you said, 40, what size tires?
I had 44s on it, but you guys only allowed a 40-inch tire, so I bought 39 5-boggers.
Yeah, nobody had 44s. Nobody even had 40s.
I know.
Like somebody with 44s were like, really? That has to be an East thing. And
it has to be a guy from New York that likes mud.
What was interesting though too is as the tires got bigger, like the 37s, but they were on, I want to say 15-inch wheels. That's right.
I think so.
Right. And in the beginning, and like people began to learn that the sidewall really mattered, right? Because if you had too much sidewall, it kind of wraps up, especially when you're aired down, sort of like a drag car, and then it releases and you start to bounce. And
hops,
that sucked. But if you don't have enough, then there's obvious problems there. And it was just like getting the right amount of sidewall and how thick it was. That kind of goes back to what I was saying about those tire guys, and then people showing up with bigger tires. We ended up changing it to 2 tire sizes, 35s, 37s, and then later 40s, if I recall. But and we just had a little gate. It went over the tires. If it went around your tire, you're good. If it didn't, well, you're not.
Yeah, it says you got a tool that you measured it by, because that was a big thing too. A lot of the guys were taking a bigger tire and shaving it down to just fit, because it didn't go by the number on the size of the tire.
Yeah,
it meant whether it fit in the gauge or not. Yeah. When I went to Johnson Valley in 2001 to that event, that definitely changed my life, watching the rock crawling, being part of it. But there was people there that were so good to me. I always joke, they held my hand. So the person that I was in front of was Johnny G. He had that Avalanche Engineering Jeep with the red chassis and the white body on it. I was petrified on what to do. And that guy said to me, just relax, do this. I would go over there and try this. And he was one of the guys that just kind of helped me along the way and just talked me through all the stuff. Cause I didn't really know anybody, at that time. I knew a couple of guys that when we were at Top Truck, and they were there as photographers and stuff. And it was mayhem. You had thousands of people running all over, and every time you turned around, it was something good. There was that guy that had that big purple XJ Jeep that was there. It was like huge. I don't know if you remember that thing.
Snuffleupagus looking thing.
Yeah. And it was like every time he was going to go, everybody ran to see what was going to happen, as he was going to flip over or wreck or whatever. So it was interesting. And I learned a lot from many of those competitors that rubbed off on me on how I treat or I try to treat most other people nowadays. Because they were so good to me with, like I said, helping me with stuff, like lower your tire pressure a little bit, or you should drive off that and then try to do this, and try to do that. And it was really cool. It was really great people and a great time to learn my way into the sport and grow into it with everybody else. Like I said, it was really, really cool. And every time that you guys made a change or did something, we all, sometimes we didn't like it, but we all adapted to it. And you were pretty much spot on. You were just pushing the sport forward. Always, the organization. I mean, one of the things I'd love for you to touch base on is how did you get into the idea of the man-made courses? How did that come about, Rance? Because I was lucky enough to be on, I think, almost all of them I competed on. But how did that happen? How did it come about?
Well, right now I'm at Best Off Road, and just down the road from us is a skateboard park. And the freeway is right over here. And Mark and I, oh God, we're driving along. We're talking about the sport. We're coming up to Supercrawl.
Yep.
And I think it was like 6 weeks, maybe 8, I don't know, before it. And I look over at the skateboard park, and I'm like, that's what we have to do, right? We need a skateboard park, because it's challenging. You go out in the middle of nowhere, and you're trying to bring spectators in, and they have to drive 1 million miles, and they've got a car. I mean, we had people stuck a lot in their station wagon or whatever, trying to get to the event. And so it really limited the crowd, and we're trying to make it a mainstream sport, but we're out in the middle of nowhere. It's sort of like the Baja 1000. Everybody knows it. Nobody sees it, but everybody knows it. And we didn't want to be the greatest sport nobody sees. So we were contemplating that like crazy. And then we drive by the skateboard park, and I was passenger, and I looked out and I go, that's what we need to do. Half joking. And then the more we talked about it, we're like, yeah, let's do it. So, so I think it was like, I don't remember the timing, but I remember it was damn close to Supercrawl. And we said, let's do Supercrawl there. I don't know where we had planned, but we're going to scrub it, and we're going to do it in a metropolitan area. So we run out to Rocky Mountain Raceway here in Salt Lake City, and we talked to Doug Binstock was the racetrack manager, and he had that section. You've been there. He had that section between the drag strip and the parking lot, and he said, you guys, if you'll build the course, I'll reserve the date, and you only have to pay me, a certain giant amount of money. It's like, wow, boy, thank you for being so generous, right? But there's no risk. You build the course, and I'll open the gate. And so we decided to do it. And then I'm running around like in the crappiest parts of town looking for something to fill the void, right? We have to build an obstacle on flat ground, and there's something about that. And we found these giant tubes, these concrete tubes. You've seen those. They've been used a lot since, but we just happened to cross them because we were desperately looking for something to fill the void of all these obstacles. And so we brought a bunch of those in, and Daryl Motley from your neck of the woods.
Sure. UROCK. Yep.
Yeah. He came out and he helped. He was a rock star. He worked his guts out, and we built that course in like 3 or 4 weeks. And then we had that event, and, there was like that really tall obstacle everyone called the Matterhorn.
Yeah.
At that time it was, I mean, that was kind of a sketchy obstacle. You know, it was quite tall and there's no sides and nobody really done much on it. But that's how we did the man-made courses. And it's interesting because the thing we found at that very event was we got to change the way we do man-made courses, because when you start on flat ground and you have something come up from it, people roll and they get hurt. We never had somebody knocked out, but I'll bet you that 6 or 8 people were just limp under their vehicle. It was kind of scary.
Yeah. Big drops even if it's a 10-foot tall obstacle, when it's flat on the side of it, you're falling 10 feet straight down with no grade to make your slide or roll on.
Yeah. You just there's no touchdown. There's just thud.
Yeah.
So that had to be changed. But yeah, that was quite a deal and super stressful. And but I think that made a big difference. And it's funny because sorry, I'm going on probably too long, but
was that 04? Was that in 2004?
Yeah, it could have been. Yeah, it was right around there.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Rick Payway. I don't know if anyone. Yeah, Rick Payway. He's the editor, and I don't know which magazine. I know he was JP. He was also 4-wheel and off road. Or
it was every magazine.
Yeah, he's like a legend. The very first event in Farmington, he came walking. He's walking up the wash towards me, and he's like charging, you know. And he's like, Ranch. And he comes up to me and he says, "You're ruining the sport." And I was like, "Oh, that's awesome. You know, I've got a lot of pressure, but I'm ruining the sport single-handedly." But like that little Martian going to blow up the earth, you know, on the cartoons. Yeah. But he was seething. And then when we did this event, that man-made event, he was like, "This is the way it should be, you know, because you're not out like trashing things and making it all about throttle and whatever." We became really good friends, but it's just such a change. And I felt like, God, in some ways the man-made stuff has been more difficult. And what's interesting too is that my idea of bringing it to metropolitan areas really didn't work, because when you bring it to a city, you compete with the city, you know, like where's one of the best places to go for crowds? Jellicoe. It's always great. It was. And I think the population there is 1,900. But,
and every one of them came to the rock crawling event.
Yeah, and they brought. I mean, it was like every town came to the rock crawling event, you know. So
yeah, I feel people that weren't part of that that time, to be lucky enough to be part of what was happening like that, will never understand. I hope they do get to understand someday, that we get to that point again, to know what it's like to come off a course and to have course marshals that are going to clear the crowd so you can drive to the next obstacle, because there's so many people trying to get to you, to your vehicle, to your spotter for autographs and for anything they can do. It was insanity, this stuff that was going on. Absolute insanity. It was crazy.
You need to go.
Yeah.
You need to go here. There's videos all about Jellicoe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was quite the show.
Yeah, it was an amazing place, and the people were great. And then we, you know, so we merged. And speaking of the East, right? Mark Patey, who is still a partner of mine in various things. We merged our companies, our entities, and then we thought, well, God, we're gonna. This is so funny, I guess, just to me, but we thought, well, we're going to do. There was a lot of competition. There's UROCK, and there's EROCK, and there's, you know, just it's everywhere. There's popping up out of the woodwork, right? These competitions, and so we're feeling a little bit of pressure. And then we merged, and we were sitting in an office one night, just laying out a plan for next year. And we decided we're going to break the sport up into 2 series, Pro Series and Extreme Series. And this Extreme was like the semi-pro series. You worked up into the Pro Series. And we're going to bring other organizations in, and we did. And so we flew out east, and we met with everybody from
You have to
UROCK.
look
And then,
down, Rand.
what's that?
Pro Nationals. That was the 3 letters that changed rock crawling.
Yeah, that's it. So the Pro Nationals, and anyway, that fateful night where we decided we're going to do this, and we had these events and where they're going to be, and there were 16 events. We did 16 events that next year, and Mark he's so excited. He's animated anyway, and he's like, "There's no way we can fail. Look at that. There's no way that this isn't going to work." And we did all the 16 events, but then we found that the problem was, you go to the sponsors, and they did 4 events last year, but now they're getting 16, and they're giving you exactly no more money, right? And we found that out all too late, and it was like a really, really difficult time. And the irony, I guess, is him saying, "There's no way we can fail with this," and I'm like, that almost put us under. It was rough. But
that
it was
maybe.
I do want to kind of touch on it quick. You're talking about all the different competing series, and one thing I found interesting was before Big Rich started Cal Rocks and then We Rock, he was a judge for your series.
Yeah. He judged he lived, I think, in Cedar City, and he said, "Hey, there's this place down here you got to come down and take a look at." So I drive down there, and Three Peaks, right? A lot of people know about that area. And I'm like, yeah, let's do an event. So, and the city was awesome. The city really welcomed us, and Rich did, to his credit, a lot to make that event happen. And it's a little bit fuzzy, the timeline, but he moved, I think, to California, and then he started Cal Rocks. And I remember being a little bit honestly bugged by it. And I talked to him, and he goes, "Oh, I'm just going to stay here in California." And he did do that for a while. And then he started We Rock. And then I'm like, "Oh, really? We Rock, and we have UROCK? That's awesome." Yeah, everybody was competitive. The competitors were competitive. The competing series were competitive. There was all kinds of things that we could fight about every single event. But it's funny how that's changed, because he's a great guy, and we get along really, really well. And his son, Little Rich, and I are pretty close too still.
Yeah, they're good guys. The first event in Pennsylvania that we had at Paragon Adventure Park, Rich and Bob Rogge came out, set courses, and I had done your event in California. And when they set the courses in PA, about everybody lost their mind, just like I did the first time I went to California. And then it became normal for me. I was like, no, this is what we do. We drive off the side of ledges that are potentially going to kill you. Yeah, that's normal. That's what we do now. That's what extreme rock crawling is. So when Rich set the cones and everybody was complaining, he goes, we're in the driver's meeting and people are complaining. He said, "Charlie, are you going to drive off that?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Then someone else is going to drive off it if Charlie will." It was like nonstop craziness like that. And I'll never forget when you decided to have that pro class, you guys picked who was going to be pro. And that was like the biggest waiting game for all of us to see who was going to get picked. And then you've got to be careful what you get picked for, because we got picked for the pro class, and we decided to run the East and the West Coast. And boy, was that an interesting thing. I actually would leave my truck and trailer with Tom Woods at his place, and I would fly back and forth because some of the events were so close. It was crazy that I would fly out there, get in my truck, drive to an event. I'd be in Tom's parking lot outside working on my cars I'm always breaking something, and I'm working on it in the parking lot outside. Sometimes it's snowing, sometimes it's raining, all sorts of stuff to get ready to the next event. Or you guys are changing the rules. There's got to be a bar over your head, or mesh, or the firewall has to be this. You can't have an opening. It was always something. And something that's funny that I forget to tell people all the time. Back before Rick and Johnny G winched down the front of one of the first buggies when he ran the winch cable around the front axle in Farmington and started climbing that big wall. Before that, none of us had done that, and none of us put water in our tires either. The year before that year when I was out west, Tom Woods said to me, he goes, "Why don't you put water in your tires like a tractor so it stays low to the ground?" And I was like, "What do you know? Just keep building drive shafts, water in your tires." Like, what an idiot. Who would put water in their tires? Tom, please, would you just stop? Just build good drive shafts. Let me keep my stuff here. We're going to be okay. Look what happened.
Yeah. Everyone ran water in their tires.
Yeah, now, all over the place.
Yeah, it's really weird how things change because of the competition. And, that's why I keep preaching that you got to have the competition and you got to have people involved, and it can't be just competitors.
Yeah, without a doubt. It really is. It drives, the competitors do these incredible things. And when we push the components, I mean, remember when a 35 spline axle was like, if you were running 35 spline, that was it. It was like 35 spline. Now you laugh. 30, that's all you're running. I mean, if you're not running 40 spline and when you're running a standard axle, if you're not running 40 spline with a 10-inch ring and pinion, or some of these guys are running 14 bolts with that, it's like, please, 35 spline. What are you, poor? Like, you got to step up your game, It's gotten that crazy, and that's all competition driven, on what it is. And you're right. These manufacturers, I hope they do realize, and you do, and I shouldn't say all of them, because you do have some great companies, especially the sponsors that are on board with us right now. They've stuck with XROCK, a lot of them from the start, and they continue to come back. And we use their products and do stuff with them, but they have also developed. You take someone like Brannick, who's just takes on by a storm so many things that are out there, or you look at these different companies like Radial Dynamics, like you were talking about, building new products and doing things and working at what's going on and constantly trying to give better products for all this. And there's a whole list of them actually going across the screen of all these people that either support in one way or the other or build products and test it. But it is really a way that I hope they do realize, Ranch, listening to you, that it does take commitment from these vendors and these companies to develop the products and to help us push the envelope. I mean, my son's 16, and he's lucky enough that he's got an invite to the LCQ for Trailbreaker that Rich runs, and I can't wait to see what he's doing in the next couple of years. And the way the cars are developing and being built, I think his driving can keep stepping up and the cars can keep getting better. And I can't imagine what they're going to conquer next, but it has to do with the competition side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what, Dana
Charlie,
Zamaloa,
I thought we weren't.
What?
Charlie, I thought we weren't talking about that LCQ position yet.
Yeah, well, I had to say something about it. Sorry.
With it.
He'll talk about it another time.
Well, yeah, Dana Zamaloa, she was in the day when things were really pushed. She was with Toyo Tires, and probably
she's on here.
Not rock crawling related, but desert racing related was the person that saved the mint. If manufacturers, if marketing people were like that, where they got the bigger picture, where every piece of their marketing funneled into this same message, and they pushed the brand, I think it would change the sport today. I think that is the problem. I think it's funny because nowadays, they're like I said, it's too bad there's no magazines because there's no authority. Now you get this empirical information from people who experienced one thing and now they know all things. And I'm not bashing on anybody. That's just the way it is, right? There's no magazines. There's no real source. And sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought. So manufacturers are sort of scrambling. Like they used to have advertising dollars. Where do you put advertising dollars, right? You have marketing, you have advertising. They should kind of complement each other, but they have been really scrambling. And in all the scrambling, somehow, unbelievably, a lot of them have missed motorsports. And you see all the Jeeps out there, and you can talk about mall crawlers all day long. And there's a term of mall crawler for a reason, and it's a damn good one. It's because people want to look like rock crawlers.
Yeah.
And why people wouldn't grab onto that and say, look, we need to win at rock crawling, because if we win at rock crawling and at all costs, that's a marketing dollar, then people who will never go rock crawling, or at least never to an extreme even close to these guys, will be putting that stuff on because they want to look like that. They want to emulate that. And it shows out there every single day. And with the loss of the magazines, they should be even putting more effort into competitive motorsports, because they don't have a place to put their advertising dollars. They should dump that into marketing and focus on building a better product and pushing that product through a form of competition.
Sure.
And I keep preaching that. I have no reason to, other than I think that's really a big thing that needs to happen out there. And we always worked with teams to try. Like I said in the beginning, it started off with people in just Jeeps. They were just like Ned Bacon. He wasn't a competitor. He wrote, and all of them. I'm drawing a blank. Harold Off. I don't know why that name would ever leave my head. He's one of the instrumental people in this entire sport. But they were just recreational rock crawlers that happened to be known because of magazines.
That's right.
And then suddenly they're thrust into this new position of being a professional. And, when I'm talking about manufacturers, I have to talk about competitors and probably tick people off, but they really need to, I think as a competitor, you have to look at what your program is and say, how does this program actually benefit my sponsor? I think if you can do that, you can change the sport as well from the team side. Not look at yourself, look at who's funding yourself and think, how can I make their company better? And it's got to be more than like grabbing a thing and saying, oh, we won today and I want to thank my sponsors X, Y, and Z. They have to be really innovative in how they push that product and make their product become the halo product that everybody wants to emulate.
Right. Greg Higgs was talking about, I don't know if you know Greg, he invented the grumper and a whole bunch of the bumpers and stuff and done that. And he's a really great guy. And I spent a lot of time talking to him about, he always jokes about people that hate on the angry grills and the grumper bumpers and stuff. And he's like, you got to remember, if you're in this part of it, the extreme part that we're in, we need all those people. So you may laugh or joke, but we all started somewhere and came along and worked our way through it. And if that's their way to get in and that's what they can afford or what they like or what they're going to do, so be it to them. That's their thing. That's what they want to be a part of. And that ultimately, with them buying those parts, whether they buy the same rims you have, whether it's a brand, may not be the size or it may not be billet or forged or whatever, maybe a simulated beadlock, but they're going to say, I have the same wheels that, whoever the rock crawler is they're looking at, that he's running out there. And they want to, like you said, they want to be like, they're never going to go drop off a 15-foot ledge or crawl through a canyon like that, but they want to have those wheels. And they want to know when they wash their Jeep in their driveway and they take a picture of it because they love looking at it, that they're running those great products. I mean, how many of them need a worn winch on there? But they don't need any winch at all. But they'll spend the money to have it because they see all of us with the greatest products out there running around. And the same thing with the tires. They're never going to use the capability of the tires that they're doing. They're on the blacktop. They could be running an all-season tire. Yeah. But again, the sport has pushed that envelope so far that the people, their perception is that if you want to have the best stuff, these are the people that are doing it. And it is very, very clear as you watch your answer, especially the way you laid it out. You're right. They need to get out there and develop and work on stuff. And there's hungry teams out there that are working hard with different manufacturers now, trying to develop and better products. And there's super smart companies, small ones, big ones, that are doing all sorts of things that maybe aren't investing back into the sport enough but you do get some good ones though, and we're lucky to have those people out there. So I hope it keeps growing like that.
Yeah, I think the MT thing is a good example. Like how many vehicles out there really need to run MTs?
Right.
Not all that many, as a percentage, but they sell the hell out of them because, excuse my French, because that's what the big guys run, right? They're running MTs and they look really cool. And, at Terraflex, we had a LCG kit, a long arm kit, the first thing we did, and it was a lot of money. And I remember having a debate with Mark Faulkner, my partner. He's like, we don't sell very many of those. Why don't we just cut it? And I'm like, no, we can't. We can't. Like, people can't afford it, is what he'd say. And I'd go, I know, but they wish they could, right? And so it's not that we want to make them wish they could. It's that we want to have a product that everybody wants, because if I have the product that they want, then my brand is the brand they want. And if they have a lesser product that they can still afford and it still has that brand name, they feel pretty good about that too. You know, that's one of those marketing things, but it drives the whole sport. And at the end of the day, long arm kits, they do perform better. And so just that alone drives the sport. Well, then, and it's very likely, I can't remember, to be frank, but it's very likely that long arm kits kind of started coming about because of competitive rock crawling. Because again, it started out with Jeeps and then people are hacking them up. They went home and grabbed the grinder and things began to change,
Yeah.
So
you look at how much what Curry did and how much he built off the Rock Sports idea of all the J arms and the Johnny joints and the springs and anti-rock sway bars. I mean, I remember when they built the first anti-rock sway bar and put it on there, we all let a sway bar. And we probably said, what are you going to the mall? And then we saw his Jeep perform and we were like, we all need sway bars now. Get me a sway bar right away, right?
Yeah.
It was like a game changer.
Yeah, those Curry boys they are game changer people. They're very competitive, They're super above board. Just for the record, when we came out with our CRD, our axle, the Terraflex 60.
I remember.
Yeah, and we were at SEMA and we're all proud of it. John comes over and he's like, oh crap. And he pulls me aside and he goes, I want you, look at, and he starts scanning through his phone and he goes, there's a picture of an axle and damned if it doesn't look really close to what we just developed, and he goes, I'm freaking out because we would have had it here, but we had something. And in the next 3 or so weeks, we're going to be releasing, the Rock Jock axle.
Yep.
And I don't want you to think that I copied this. I mean, he's really above board, he's a good guy. And so we've always been competitors in our manufacturing companies, but always super friendly. I don't think you can go wrong with Ray or John or Casey, Brand, any of them. So for what that's
I remember when they
awesome people.
Do you remember when they built that all aluminum center section for Shannon? It was to try to be lightweight. It was probably that Cadillac buggy that he built when he put that aluminum. I think it lasted the first obstacle. Shannon just twisted the tubes off of it.
There was all kinds of stuff. There was that big iron. I don't know if anybody ever remembers that. But that thing, it showed up. Gosh, I can't even remember the gentleman's name. He had he played a violin for a living. But he was way into rock crawling. He shows up with this big buggy. I mean, physically, it's like, how are you going to get that thing through the obstacles? And it had hydraulics everywhere, and you could pick up a tire, by itself. But that didn't work. It wasn't nothing was reactive. It all had to be manually dealt with, like a tractor.
Yep.
And it just didn't work. I think he could raise it and lower it, and he got on the very first obstacle, and it got really steep, and he thought, I'm going to lower the front end, pull it down, And I think what he did is he raised the rear end accidentally, grabbing the wrong lever. I'm sure he's freaking out. And then it kind of raised the thing up, but it also shortened the wheelbase. And he was already precarious, and then you pull that thing up, and it toppled over in the most embarrassing flop, and he left, sadly, and we never saw him again.
Right.
But there was all that innovation, You bring up Shannon too, just talking about a couple of the guys from Shannon's still like deadly in a vehicle. He's
Yeah.
incredibly talented. And I remember watching him. He was kind of the cross between I was talking about with Curry, and they kind of tiptoe and find the right line, and Chris Durham, that's like hammer down, get out of the way. And Shannon was literally on an obstacle and they were, like I said, 15 minutes, right? So he's hung up on this thing in Farmington for 14 minutes and 50 seconds. And the judge yells out 10 seconds and he goes, get out of the way, get out of the way. He'd been on this spot for all of that time. And then like sheer grit your teeth willpower hammers down, and the stuff is flying, and he clears that obstacle. That to me is what makes a sport, right? It's that if rock crawling doesn't have the head to head, it has to have that last moment of desperation.
Yeah.
And that's what fans love. And Shannon always delivers on that. He's awesome.
Without a doubt. Wreckers or checkers.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold my foot to the floor and something's going to happen.
Something's going to happen. I don't know if I'll even remember it.
Right. But something's going to happen. I always said that, the world we live in now, with everybody talking about the, how many followers you have. And I understand there's great importance in all that, but there is something to be said that when there's a crowd of people, even if it's 100 people, that the drivers are there amongst everyone. And when you have a driver that you just saw conquer something that you can't believe happened, that trickle down effect of that driver talking to you about how his tires gripped or his wheels, you were so happy they didn't break, and or his shocks didn't give him enough of a bounce, whatever it was, because that sheer passion that got him through that last gate and made it happen. Or even if you didn't win, you just did something really cool, and talking about it, those people in the crowd, whether it's 1 or 100 people, they tell some people, they talk about that story, they talk about what happened, and it goes on and on and on. And that's really, in my opinion, the internet is a great thing with all these people that know nothing about off-roading. And certainly there's a tremendous amount of them that do know a lot about off-roading. But the people that are out there doing it, and when they interact with other people on a more personal level, or they share their experiences like you're doing right now, when you're telling people what's going on, this is why we got involved, because when I called you for some advice, I knew these stories had to be told, Ranch. I know who you are, and this had to be told. But this kind of stuff is what people need to hear and see, not a picture of it, of something, posed on a rock. That looks nice, but you don't really know, is that what you need, and it's hard to get to those points.
Yeah. Well, I think we were talking the other day, and the question was, do we increase the level of the obstacles in competitive rock crawling? The answer is, without qualification, yes. Yeah. It has to be tough. And it's interesting because of the lack of racing in rock crawling. It still can be fascinating for fans, and they become fans when they start to follow the person and not just the event. They like watching a guy compete. How do I say it? If I'm watching an obstacle and there's some amazing feat that just happens, and you look at it and you go, how the hell did that guy just make that obstacle? It's so unbelievable to people. That wears off quickly. I used to race motocross, and I thought that a backflip was, I actually thought there was some physics. I'm I don't think it's possible. And then when I saw it, I was just blown away, right? And then I see it again, and I'm like, oh, I just can't believe it. And then the third time, I'm like, that's pretty cool. Let's go get a Coke. Right? I'm done. And that guy had been crashing and practicing for years, and I gave him 2, and then I'm bored. And that's how it really is, I think, with most people. And it's the same with rock crawling. So if you want fans, they have to become involved in the people. It's because people are what really matter. People are what interest people.
That's right.
And all of these things are kind of extremities that draw them to certain types of people. But it doesn't have to be just the race. It really needs to be the person. And a good example is in Farmington, Chris Durham. Now, those obstacles again were a little longer, and he gets on this obstacle and he breaks a drive shaft. Clank, 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 it's banging around, and he comes down and it's banging, and and he jumps out and he grabs tools from the back of that CJ10 and throws a bag on the ground, and people are cheering. We're watching a guy do mechanical work, right? You could go down to a shop and watch a guy replacing a drive shaft. How fun would that be? But people were fascinated, and they're screaming, and the time's ticking, and the judge is like 5 minutes or whatever, and
Right.
The crowd just erupts. And he gets that old drive shaft out and a new one in, and finishes that obstacle. And it was like he just won the world championship. The place was just ablaze. It was amazing. And you've got to bring in that people part of the sport. I think that's one of the things that made it so amazing, is because of these guys that were just average guys, the Chris Durhams and Ken Shoup, and all of them were really making a name for themselves. I think that actually motivated probably you and everybody else.
Heck yeah. There was no doubt about it. Those you watch, and some super smart people I know that do marketing and stuff have said to me multiple times now, when Charlie, my son, he rock crawls and does a lot of stuff, and he's doing fabulous. I'm proud of him. He's doing better and better all the time. Maybe soon he's going to beat me. You never know. I mean, I'm hoping he's watching from the other room right now, is infuriated that I said that. But I have a feeling this is the year he's going to take me out. But as we build and grow his own brand of rock crawling and what he's doing and enjoying it at his level, many people say to me, let people fall in love with Charlie, not his Jesse Haynes moon buggy or whatever he's doing, whether it's building a mini bike or he's fishing or whatever. Let him see who he is and learn that personality. And just like you said, whether it was going to be Wagoneer doing, the tiptoeing around, right? We're not talking about his red Jeep and what tires and suspension he ran and what class he was in. Yeah, we know. Or Chris Durham, who would hit it and land on his side and then stay in the throttle till the top of the radiator got ripped off, and it was, spewing like it was a freight train, like it was a locomotive, and he's driving on the side and the body gets ripped off and the seat gets bent over and he flips onto the side, and he's so excited he flips back on his wheels and he doesn't let off the gas, and he flips on his other side, and then he still's going and the motor's smoking and everything's going on. I mean, we know where that was, we know what vehicle that was, or anything else, but that's Chris Durham, and that's the way he drove, and that's what he did, and that personality and that trait of the certain people was a huge thing in the development of people following all the different guys that were rock crawling. I mean, heck, when you watched Ken Shoup, he would just look at something. I remember when we went to the Money Pit the first year when he won it, he looked at it and said, "I'll split it with you," joking around. He said, "I'm going to win that." Like, he knew instantly, and he won it. He was like, "Yeah, no problem." And he just had that way about him. Ken was just totally like, he knew what he had. He knew his suspension was done by Jason, knew his car really, really well, and just loved it. And when we all knew who each person's attitude and persona was, and the more the crowd knew it, the wilder it got and the crazier it got. You'd hear people talking about people. Yeah, they would talk about their vehicle, but they would talk about their driving style and why they were picking products they were doing based off of how they used their vehicle. It was cool, really cool.
Yeah, the guy could become just as famous for hammering down like Chris Durham was and is.
Yeah.
Or tiptoeing it. You can be just as famous for walking an obstacle as you can for, like, holy cow, the stuff was flying everywhere, and both of those will make a person really well known and then if people will embrace the extreme parts of their personality and make a persona. I'm not saying fake anything of who you are, but accentuate those higher pieces. Then
interesting stuff.
Follow that,
yeah. Very, very, very cool. So I want to ask. Oh, go ahead, Tip. I'm sorry.
No, Jim Perry, and there's so many other people. keep saying like they feel like they're in history class all over again, and that they can listen to this for days. And it's like one of those things. To me, I feel the exact same way. Like, Ranch, you and I were on the phone for hours yesterday speaking, and you have so much knowledge and stories and thoughts behind those stories. It's just like mind-blowing. And I'm just sitting back and I am taking this all in, as is so many of our viewers. And I do want to point that out, because it's having you on here is just a privilege. And thank you for sharing all this with us. I want to get that out there now.
I feel the same way.
Well, I enjoy it. The whole sport has been, I mean, it's really been like, I've segued a little bit here and there, and I've done some different things, but off-road, like right now we have an airplane tug company, makes tugs, push back airplanes, pull them into your hangar, for general aviation. And that's awesome. But this is really my love, off-road, the people, even though I've gone through some hell with a lot of people, but they've all become, since the competition, even like the Big and Little Rich, there was some heat there. And of course I've had heat with competitors, but almost without exception, I'm very good friends with every single one of them now, because we look at it and we say, well, I was mad because of, whatever. I was mad because I'm competitive. That's really the way it all is. And that's really what the sport is about. That's why we're there. So that just goes along with it, and I can't even, the people who made the sport what it is today, I don't think it matters if it's King of the Hammers, X-Rock or what the sanctioning body is, or where. I think there's like a glut of people that have really made a huge change, and a lot of them aren't even in it. Tracy Jordan, I don't know if, does he ever, I don't see or hear from him.
He got the Matrix buggy back, and he's been doing some of the trail class ones. He's been running a little bit and stuff. I saw him not this year, last year in Arizona for a day or two.
Yeah, but there was a several year period where that guy was almost unbeatable. He was just so unbelievably good.
Yeah.
But when he first showed up, he competed in Cedar City, and he had a FJ40. It was way too tall, and he rolled and rolled and rolled. And when I made a comment about it, he was pretty not happy. And it's like, it's not the same person that he became. Jason Pauly showed up in Phoenix. He happened to get number 20, and then Walker bought that number from him, or somehow they traded. I don't know. But anyway, because that was always Walker's number. But he showed up in this blue, like a YJ thing that was also way too tall. You know how you look at a vehicle and you're like, man, there's a lot of wheel well there, right? It was kind of that.
Yeah.
And then look at what he became. Just an incredible driver. There's just so many people that made the sport. Harold, I mentioned him earlier, Harold Off. I get a little. He was a good friend. And he always was encouraging. And there were times I'm like, I don't even know why I do this. These guys, we have the super crawl at the Las Vegas Convention Center during SEMA, and I get my butt handed to me because the garbage cans were full, It's like, why do I try? And I'm not whining, but he would be my kind of the guy that I would go and complain to. And he was always encouraging. And he, you know him.
Yeah.
Knew him. And just like an instrumental guy that people won't even know. He's sort of an unsung hero, and there's a ton of them. And
there are, but when guys like you tell the stories, it hangs in there, Ranch. When guys like you, and I told you the story about when I met him at the Chili Challenge, and he was the guy that used me as a pawn to make fun of Chip. And then Walker did the same thing with him, teasing, because I was out there at the Chili Challenge right after that ARC event. And I was just lucky enough to be in the group with those guys. and they were breaking chops so hard, and they were using me as just a piece. If I did better than any one of them, I got pushed out, like they were just saying the New York kid did better than you. They were, but at the same time, really, really great group of guys. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of great people, and they did a lot for the sport. I don't even think they knew how much they did, they inspired a lot of people. I think
Sure.
they inspired a lot of builds, the buggies.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it changed the way vehicles are built. Like now, if just a Jeep, if you're building a Jeep, like get rid of all that heavy crap. Right.
Yeah.
When Tiny came out and waxed everybody and it weighed, and we actually had to put a minimum weight requirement in the rules because
I remember
people would, they'd undermine like cages and so forth for weight. It makes such a big difference. So, there's a little tidbit that people could pick up. If you want your rig to really kick butt, get rid of the fat.
Yeah.
And that came from competitive rock crawling.
Yeah. When you put that rule out, when Tiny came out and you changed the weight thing, Eddie Casanuva's yellow Samurai buggy, do you remember what he did to make weight? He put the dumbbell rack on the front axle and put dumbbells on the front axle so he could make weight. He was so aggravated about that. He was so mad, but that was the only way he could make weight to compete. And then he'd be done competing. He'd peel it. He had a rack on the front axle to put dumbbells on it back then.
Yeah.
That
changed everything. That buggy, I think it had a Volkswagen engine, and yeah, it was crazy. We did the event in Portland. Weren't you there? Portland, Indiana.
Portland?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was there when Bob Standage flipped over.
Oh yeah, that was ugly.
That was scary.
It's scary, and as a promoter, you're watching it happen, and you're thinking. I mean, that he was heading to the crowd. He was knocked unconscious.
Yeah.
Well, so everyone knows. Yeah, we had a really steep. I think it was 80 degrees, and at the time, really tall obstacle. That was one of those that you're just trying to trash our rigs and kill us, but
glad you could admit it now.
Yeah, he went up there and kind of did this. Oh, and also just before that, we had made a rule that you had to have a 5-point harness. Everybody hated that because they couldn't lean out and look at what their tire was doing. So I think the combination was such that he hit his face on the steering wheel and it knocked him out.
Yeah, he didn't have his
upper harness. The chassis and the throttle cable was going through a tube in the chassis, and it pulled the throttle. And he's out cold. And here goes a vehicle that's designed to.
He ran my car over, Ranch. I was in the lineup there. He ran over my car first, and then ended up hitting the other ones.
Yeah, and stopping. Joel Randall, I think, was the rig that finally stopped it, but by pure freaking luck. And otherwise, he's heading to the crowd, and I'm thinking, please, no kids.
Yeah.
There was some crazy stuff, and we learned from it, but
yeah. That was quite the obstacle. That was an awesome place, the Xplex, right?
Yeah, that's right. It was.
Yeah, you guys gave out those little coins. You gave out those medallions from there.
Yeah,
that was first class, great event, really, really cool, really, really cool.
Wait, where's it at?
You touched base on the SEMA show, and I don't know if that was near a highlight for you guys or not, but the fact that you built a full-on crazy competition rock crawling course at the SEMA show in a dedicated amount of time, had an event, then broke it down and did everything with it. How the heck did you convince them to let you do that? And how did you pull it off? Because that was absolutely insane. My daughter Hannah was a little baby. She was there. My wife and I were there with her, and of course I was there. I couldn't not be there, and that was absolutely incredible to be in downtown Vegas. And I don't know if we had the most spectators or anything else, but it was pretty damn cool to be a part of that whole thing.
Oh man, that was quite a thing. That was really stressful. Right before the event, they said the SEMA show, SEMA said we had to have an exorbitant amount of insurance. We're like, holy cow, and it's literally days. We've got the course kind of drying. And we were scrambling. It was pretty trying, but We built that thing on polystyrene blocks, styrofoam. I don't know if
I
you
remember.
And they started, SEMA only gets the convention center for a finite amount of time. And I think we had 2 days, or maybe it was 3, but I think it was 2 to build that course. So in the middle of the night, these semi trucks of styrofoam started showing up, and we were just pushing them out and, putting them into, God, it was just like crazy decision-making on the fly, And then we had batteries with welding wire, and we're just cutting it to sort of shape the course. And they were, if you remember right, there was some obstacles that were like 18 feet tall. That waterfall was 18 or 20 feet tall.
Yeah.
And we plumbed it and got water up there. And we did that quickly. And then the event happened. And it was one of the amazing things. Jason Scherer, I don't know if you remember that last obstacle. It was so late at night. It went really quite late. And he was on that very last obstacle and hung up, and he was hammered down back and forth, and the crowd was going crazy, and he won that event, if I remember right. And it was impressive. And by then I thought I'd seen it all, but I was still really impressed with that performance. And then after the event, we had to clean it. We had to shrink it down. It was in the silver lot. And so we had to get rid of probably like 80% of the obstacles. And that was on Sunday night. And we were doing that we stayed up all night, and then all day the next day, Monday, getting rid of all the stuff, all the dirt, everything. And then by Monday late afternoon, they're bringing in displays, and we had the big waterfall left. And that was the UROCK booth. And I still think to this day, it's one of the biggest booths that they've ever had, and it was donated. Thank goodness. But when we were competing, I don't know if the concrete was still hot. People were driving on it. It's like, this is not ready. It was hot, and we had a few failures, and it was kind of looked like a yard sale. But it was awesome.
I remember all that. I was very lucky. That was one of my highlights on whatever it was, the A side or whatever it was. At the end of the day, I was the leader on one side, and I think on the B side, Tracy was the leader on the B side of it. It was pretty awesome. I made it into the final event on that, and I ended up having a rear steering hose broke at the very last obstacle. But it was definitely, that was awesome to be a part of that again. Just something really, really cool. And what I remember, when you were in the group there, when you were inside watching it, there was people like Chip Foose, Dennis Anderson, like unbelievable motorsports legends from different fields were walking around and looking and talking with you. And like, they were like, this is like unbelievable what you guys are doing, and it was like, and you're like, I know who you are. I'm like, you think this is cool? I know what you do. It was really, really, it was an amazing thing to be a part of. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought so too. It was just like a huge privilege. It was a lot of work for all of us, and a lot of, but looking back, it was such a great time, and it made I think it had some, a little bit, it made some difference, some change.
Yeah. So Ranch, I know you probably have other stuff you want to talk about, but I have one more thing on my list that I want to make sure I get to, and then whatever else we can touch base on if Tiff allows us. But I want to make sure I touch base on this. You're a huge, huge promoter of making sure we have open lands and making sure that you're watching out for all of us, even us that are on the other side of the country. You're protecting our right to be able to go off-roading and to give us open space and do that. And I would love it if you took a couple minutes and tell us about how you do it, what you do, and how anybody that's on this, how we could get involved even in the smallest way to make sure we're contributing to do the same thing that you've done in a little bit if we can do it, or in a big way if we can, because we're all very lucky to have someone like you as a spokesperson for us.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. To be honest, in days gone by, like we'd be at SEMA show, I had my booth there with TerraFlex, and a land use guy would come walking down the aisle, and I'm like, oh hell, I'm going to run to the bathroom, because I didn't want to talk about it all day, it was. But here I am, and the reason I'm the president of the Blue Ribbon Coalition, and I'll be blunt about this a little bit. I was asked to be on the board of directors several years ago, and I really contemplated. It's just so boring, House bill number whatever, and it just to me was so boring. But we're also literally losing our lands. You look at you guys back east, there's not very many places to go. You got a lot of great parks. They're privately held, and that's awesome, but that's not the way it really should be. There should be private parks, and they should be supported, but there should also be public land that you can go on. And it's getting worse and worse. And so more recently, over the last 5 or 6 years, it's been, well, it's even been before that. Like here, there's millions of acres that are at risk. And in no time, there won't be a place to go. Like,
right.
We're always on the defense. They shut down some land, and we go in and we sue them. And that's what the Blue Ribbon Coalition does. Excuse me. We're actually in the fight. We appreciate and we support trail etiquette. But I joined this because it is the fight, and I like being on that edge. Like trail etiquette, going off the trails or leaving crap on the trails, garbage and whatnot, has never, to my knowledge, it just doesn't shut down trails. I think it's a political play to say that it does. It doesn't. And so what does shut down the trails is people that don't use the trails. The trail doesn't get used, then the brush starts growing up a little bit here and there, and the BLM can go in and they can say, oh, this is not being used. It's been reclaimed by the land. And they reclassify it as reclaimed, and it's gone. It's no longer a trail. And the problem is there is no means of opening a trail. Like, how do you open a trail?
Right.
Nobody, what they do, people, well, I don't even want to say how it works, but, there's no good way to say, I want to open a new trail. It's absurd to even think. And that's a problem. So I couldn't stand it. They asked me to do it. I didn't really want to get into that stuff, but I did. And then a couple of years later, I was nominated to be the president, which is sort of like the chairman of the board.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my role now. And I like it because I think things need to change. I'm tired of being on defense. We need some offensive moves. And literally, like right now, there's 317 miles in Moab. I'm sure everyone's heard of that they've shut down. And they're very precise in what they do. They shut down a little branch here and a little branch there, and all the dispersed camping where you could just pull over and camp, that's gone in these areas. And they shut down trails but the problem is they shut down trails that people don't really necessarily love, but they led to an overlook or something along those lines. And then they left other trails open that go to nothing and have no obstacles on them. So what's the point for most people? They won't go out there. And then those trails will become overgrown, and they'll reclaim them, and then they'll be gone. And then there's only this last battle of the Easter Jeep Safari trails, and they'll shut those down, and people will freak, and then it'll be done. And the thing that worries me the most is that's the Mecca. You can like Moab, you can hate it, but it is what it is. It's the Mecca for rock crawling, and it has been for years. And when they shut that down, it's just like everything else topples. And then everywhere is regulated to private land and parks. And, I'm just trying to prevent that. I'm doing what I can. We have some great people. Shannon Welch is the vice president there. She's from the Hammers. She did a lot. She's done just
great person. I know who she. Yeah, I know who she is.
We have some strong people, and we're in an actual fight. And I'm trying to just get the message out that look, we're never going to win by. I'm not suggesting people go out and be crappy on the trails, but we're never going to win by just being good on the trails, being good stewards of the land. We have to do that because we're good people. But to stop what's happening, we have to fight. And it's in the courtroom. And that's just the truth, And so we really need help. It's expensive. We're hiring a staff attorney. We're excited about that, but that's what it is. So if people want to donate, that's where they should donate. I think if you want to stop it, the only way to do it is to fight back. And like people like SUA, Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance, they sue the BLM for everything. And then the BLM gets kind of timid, and who do they lean into? They lean into us. And we do nothing. We don't fight back. We let them shut it down. We stamp our feet and, we're mad. And then we go on to another trail, or we say, screw Moab or whatever, but that doesn't fix it. Right. So the only way to stop it is to not allow the BLM to lean into anybody. You don't lean into us. We're just going to push back. You got to actually do your job and manage the land and manage it for everybody. And that's kind of our goal. I would love to see more trails opened in the East,
So that's why we hear a lot, closure isn't management.
Yeah, because it's not. It's just a cop-out. It's just a way. And that's not we didn't coin that phrase. That's not.
Right, I know, yeah.
But it's definitely true.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we had a fella on, David Dempsey, a few weeks back, and he was from New Jersey, and he really helped with the Pine Barrens area and stuff, and he's been doing it for years as well, trying to keep a lot of stuff open in Jersey, which is a lot of fire roads and less dramatic off-roading, but still, nonetheless, they're trying to close stuff down, and he does the same thing. We try to support him as well with signatures and donations and things we can gather, because if you don't know how important it is, which unfortunately not everybody does, at some point, if you love the sport and you love off-roading, you're going to realize that at some point how important it is to have great people that'll stand up and fight for the land and for our ability to use it.
Yeah. Yeah. Tiffany, did you have something too?
No, I wanted to speak about David Dempsey and about all the stuff, because he did actually just get recognized by the mayor for stepping in. He got a certificate from him, I think, just in this past week, of going in. He does the land cleanup and everything else, because like you said, people with the complaining of using land, and he's fighting. We've put his petitions up, so like for our viewers to see and everything. And if we have links for you or anything that we can put in our comments, we will do that too, just to get from the East Coast, because a lot of our competitors and just avid rock crawlers, they travel all over the country, and they want to be able to use that land too and experience that.
Yeah.
Another thing I did want to touch on, because we're on the subject, is the volunteerism, because we talked about this, and it goes across what you're doing with the coalition and it goes hand in hand with the rock crawling aspect of it when you were the promoter, and even now into different series.
With respect to being a volunteer?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, when so I've always felt like if you're volunteering to do a job, you're volunteering to do the job. And I've dealt with a lot of volunteers, you guys do too. There's volunteers in the sport. There has to be. Hopefully it can advance someday to where they get paid, but there's a long way to go. But yeah, I feel like, and Shannon's of this same mind, when we volunteer to do a job, we volunteer to do the job excellently. We're not, if somebody wants to volunteer to do a half-baked job and they feel like they can just kind of partially do it, this sounds so mean, but it's really true. You're trying to grow a sport. You're trying to change, the world of rock crawling. You're trying to have an outstanding event. You want everybody safe. You want people to have fun. You want it to be fair. And the only way for that to happen is for people to do a really, really good job, as if they're paid, as if they're professional. And the interesting thing is they're more passionate usually as volunteer, or often I should say, as volunteers, more passionate than if you just paid some guy that came in and applied for a job. And so I think if people want to volunteer, you are volunteering to do an amazing job. You can't say, well, God, what do you expect? I'm just a volunteer. It's like, then you shouldn't have volunteered. I know that sounds terrible, but that's, it's the same thing for us at the Blue Ribbon Coalition. We all, the board of directors is all voluntary, and everybody feels that way. And they put in a lot of effort. They're up late nights. It's a task. It's a pretty monumental task, and it's a monumental task to put on a really good event. And those volunteers are hard to get. And when you get one that's really good, it's really challenging, because I know you don't make a lot of money as a promoter. It's hard to make money as a promoter. People have a magic calculator and they look around and they overestimate the crowd. And then they do this magical math, right? It's $10 a person or whatever it is. And then there's X number of people here. And so these guys are making all this money, and the entry fee was this much money, but they don't know insurance. They don't know travel expenses for all those people. They don't know, there's just a lot to it. And so you have to have volunteers. And I think it's important for your organization, for XROC, for any voluntary thing. If you're going to do it, then do it, or don't. Is that kind of like, that's how I feel about volunteers, and it's really rough. And when I say it to volunteers, oftentimes they're no longer my fan. they're like, I hate that guy, but that's how it should be.
Absolutely.
It's hard to hear the truth sometimes.
Yeah. Yep. But so I'm involved still in the Blue Ribbon Coalition. I've got Best Off Road, which is a retail store. We're getting ready to open up a second store as soon as possible. And then we have a brand that we're launching called Torix. And we've got some cool components there that we've been working on for quite a while. We've got 3 mechanical engineers and 1 software engineer. So that's my involvement to now.
Very exciting. And what are you 4-wheeling now, Rich? Do you still have your Jeep?
Yeah. I rebuilt it. We stripped it. We redid the suspension and I lengthened it and did some things, but it's raw steel. And I'm too lazy to make it the body right. So I'm just like, actually, the truth is there's a Brennan, I think, is a Hot Wheels guy. He's a friend of Dana's. He's the guy who designs most Hot Wheel cars, or a lot of Hot Wheel cars. He's the lead designer there. And at SEMA, we were with him for a long while, and he had a 69 Camaro there that's raw steel. And he said, well, I was going to paint it, and but I got so tired, and I thought, well, I'm done for a while. I'm just going to clear coat it so it doesn't rust, and then I'll get back on it. And I love that freaking car. It's so cool, and it's got these imperfections. And I thought, that's how I'm doing my Jeep. So I stripped it down, all the paint. I got the dents out as much as I could, but it's not perfect. And then I clear coated it, and you have to keep up on it, but it does pretty good. And when people talk about, well, why didn't you fix the dents? I'm like, it's naked. Like, how do you look naked? There's some imperfections, I'm guessing, so I still have it. And we've got other Jeeps as well, but that's still that one's never leaving.
Yeah. Yeah, I can remember it from all the times. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Find our way around. What else do you want to tell us, or what else do you think? What should we know? What else should we know? I had my list of stuff, and I think we went over all of it. What should we know about Ranch Pratt? What have you done? What was your favorite thing to do? Where did you like to wheel? Give us something else good at the end here.
Oh, what do I want to tell you? Well, like my favorite place to wheel. I don't know. I like them all. We went to California and did a run last year with the Cal 4-wheel guys, and it was awesome. It wasn't the most difficult stuff, but it wasn't easy, and it was rainy and sucky, and we had a ball. Yeah. And I love the desert, and Farmington's awesome. Las Cruces they're all great. 4-wheeling is great. Yeah. There is no favorite place. If I'm in my seat, I'm having fun. But I think as the sport goes, it's really a lot of those things that I talked about. I feel strongly that this sport still has a lot of room to grow, rock-based motorsports. And there's problems, that have to be overcome, but I think that they can be, and it can be something outstanding. And I think there needs to be a little more recognition. Like, I'll probably get some enemies for this, but I think the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame needs to think about rock-based motorsports a little bit, because I tell you what, there's a lot more vehicles out there influenced by rock crawlers than there are by desert trucks. And I love desert. You know, I'm good friends with Matt Martelli, Roger Norman. But there is no denying that when I'm driving around, there's a lot of vehicles that are inspired by what goes on in competitive rock crawling or competitive rock sports, period, you know, and they're all awesome. So I hope that the teams and the promoters will see that bigger picture and start driving towards it. Like, I would love it if it was it needs to be televised. It's a national motorsport, and for the manufacturers, you need to get behind it all. You need to get behind the teams, all right, because it's like impossibly expensive. People would always say, don't make it a rich man's sport. I'm like, seriously, how am I going to stop that? Right? I'm going to say, you can't spend, I can't do that. So they need sponsors, but the sanctioning body needs sponsors, and there's always that balance. If it just goes to the teams because those are the ones that the cameras are on, there's no event and there's nothing to shoot, you know, from a camera. And so, but if the manufacturers, if the promoter, if the teams come together with a solid vision, and it changes the sport and it becomes bigger than it is and it becomes mainstream, there's going to be a lot more vehicles out on the street wanting to look like that, and everybody wins. And it has to be that synergy. That's what has to happen.
Yeah. Awesome.
So, yep.
Well,
that's all I have. That's
Ranch, I honestly can like sit here and listen to Ranch like all day long. Like I said, we were on the phone for hours last night. I feel like we've touched on so much more. I've heard half this podcast was nothing that we covered in our conversations, because you have opened up like your memory box to share with me yesterday and today, and it's just like, I don't know, it's just incredibly interesting.
Yeah, I've had a ball. It's fun to talk about the past and what can be, you know, and let's make some things happen.
Wrench, thanks
for having me. I've had a ball.
I'll just say, don't stop doing what you're doing. Keep doing in all aspects of it. I know you're always looking to better stuff and do things, and I know you're an entrepreneur and a businessman, and you're always looking to the future. And that's why I called you for advice and to ask you questions. And I appreciate you and the friendship we've developed over the years. Thank you for everything. It was really great of you to say yes to be on tonight. I think everybody who's listening right now and will listen over and over again is going to gain a wealth of knowledge, and they're going to learn a lot about what we can do as teams, as promoters, and to try to help build the sport, and as four-wheelers to go ahead and to try to protect it. So thank you for all that. I appreciate it, for what you've done for me and my family, and I hope my son gets to live through this for a long time coming, to what you started and what a bunch of great other guys did to get going. And I'll let you guys finish it up from here. I'll hang out, but thank you, Ranch.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was good to chat and catch up, Charlie.
Charlie, thank you for coming on. You know, you got to share some of your memorabilia and everything else, but I do want to, we just got done talking about sponsors, and I don't want to end this without bringing up our sponsors for 2024, and that is Jim Markham of JM Rigging, Stan and Brandon from Brannick Motorsports, Jesse Haynes of Jesse Haynes Fabrication, Eric Amato, Radial Dynamics, 386 Fab. We have All Extremes Off-Road, Wheeling for Warriors, Black Bear Electric, Cord Reside of Mothers Off-Road Motorsports, Leah Hockman of Sheet Crawls, and then Chris Kincaid of Kincaid Fabrication. I mean, some of them, they jumped on this year, they see what we're doing, and then we have ones that have been here for years, and just thank you for all of that. Branch, it but most of all, thank you. Thank you for giving us this opportunity and creating what you did and having this vision for almost for 2.5 decades, almost 3 decades now. And
Well, we don't need to talk about the
allowing us
time.
to be able to do what
Thanks for having me.
But all right, guys, we are going to see you guys next week. Ranch, if you have links and stuff that we can share for the blue ribbon, just please send it to me and I will get that up for other people to follow as well.
Okay, I'll be sure to do it.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Good night. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
All right. Good night, guys. Thank you.
Bye, Tiff.
Bye.
Bye.